So you've heard about climate change, right? The truth is everyone's heard about climate change at this point, and maybe you're a believer in its potential devastating impact, or maybe you don't believe in it. In fact, there's there's anecdotal evidence that over 50% of the real estate community in the US does not believe that the climate is changing. Or maybe most of them think that the climate is changing, but that humans, us, we don't have anything to do with it. Or they reckon that climate change has nothing to do with real estate. I mean, if it doesn't affect my daily grind, my daily real estate hustle, then it's not worth worrying about, right? Unfortunately, wrong. Completely, unquestionably wrong. In today's talk, I'm going to prove to you beyond any doubt that if you're buying apartments, if you're renting apartments, if you're investing in apartments, if you're investing in real estate of any kind, your livelihood, your profits, your investors' profits are going to be impacted by climate change. And when I use that word impacted, I'm sugarcoating it bigly. The truth is, I'm going to make the case that the impact on real estate is the greatest of any industry in the world. Now, I'm not going to waste any of my time arguing that climate change is real. Okay, not 1 second am I going to talk about that. I'm also not going to argue that we should be doing more to stop it. This is not an environmental webinar. I'm also not going to talk about whether it represents a existential threat to humanity. No, sir, we're not going to talk about any of those things. So all environmentalists out there, you're in for disappointment because I'm not even going to start on that topic. What I'm going to show to you today is you absolutely need to worry regardless of your beliefs about climate change. My argument is that if you believe in climate change, you need to worry a lot if you're investing in real estate. If you don't believe in climate change, you need to worry a lot if you're investing in real estate. And that's what we are going to talk about today. All right, so let's get started. Our story today is fascinating. It starts with a credit rating and risk analysis company that all of you guys know. This company is called Moody's. Moody's. Many of you remember that this company, it was partially to blame for the 2008 real estate crisis. Remember, Moody's was the evil company that gave A ratings to mortgage-backed securities that were filled with toxic single-family loans that were all in default. And that crashed the real estate market. It kickstarted the Great Recession. And as you can imagine, Moody's was beaten black and blue by both investors and regulators about making that colossal mistake. And so the big wigs at Moody's, the big dudes, they basically said, never again. Never again are we going to get caught with our pants down. So guess what they did? They revamped their credit rating system. And to do that, they started looking at future risks to investors. And when they did that, their researchers, their army of research people told them that everyone was ignoring the biggest future risk to real estate investors, the impact of climate change. And Moody's research indicated that there was one single company in the US that knew how to evaluate the impact of destructive climate change on real estate. A little known company called 427. 427. This little company was already working with the world's largest investors and asset managers and commercial banks and government agencies, people whose job it is to look 10, 20, 30 years into the future. So Moody's went out and bought this company, and they started learning more about climate risk to real estate and other types of businesses. What they discovered was absolutely mind-boggling. 427, this company that Moody's bought, was tracking extreme climate changes in the US, stuff like flooding and extreme heat and wildfires, droughts, hurricanes, typhoons, tidal flooding, those sorts of things. They started tracking. So 427 started tracking the dollar losses from these events. How much money are people losing? And by the time they totaled up the numbers from all of the different climate change issues, the numbers became huge. $80 billion a year, right? And some years higher than that. On the screen, you can see that last year was massive, was $95 billion, right? Huge. These are incredibly large numbers. So they started reading headlines and investigating if anyone in the US was actually paying attention to this stuff, right? So we kind of sort of, everyone on this webinar knows that we've had hurricanes in the last year, we've had fires. You all know this, right? So there's no mystery there. The question is, are people really talking about whether, how big these losses are? And is anyone talking about the fact that each year the losses don't go up by 1%, 2%, 3%, that price of inflation? They go up a lot more. And not only are they going up, they're not going up like this. They are going up like that. Now, most people didn't know what an exponential curve was until about a year ago. And then this thing called COVID came along, and we all started becoming experts in what is known as an exponential curve. So Moody's saw an exponential curve, and they said, we're going to need to fix this, or our investors are going to lose hundreds of billions of dollars, and we're going to get blamed again. So they bought this company. They took its model. On the screen, on the left side of the screen, you see the model. It's a 6-step model. It's right. And as you can see, the model basically applies to 6 different climate events. So they took this, right, and they started applying it to the entire country. And once again, they were stunned because, as you can see from the page, 104 million people have hurricane risk in the US, and that's accelerating. 169 million people are living in areas running out of water. 92 million are living in areas which are facing extreme heat or extreme rainfall. And as they tracked these disasters, they realized that these disasters were like the coronavirus in one respect. They were exponential, right? Remember, you had 20 cases in early March for coronavirus, and then 2 months later, we had hundreds of thousands, 20, hundreds of thousands, exponential curve. These events were clearly on a curve. And so they started extrapolating the risks into the future. Not now they've looked at the past. Now they're like, I'm going to extrapolate this into the future so I can rate real estate risk in areas that were affected, right? And when they did that, as you can see from the comment on the bottom of the screen, crazy, crazy stuff happened. And I want to tell you more about that, but I'm going to take a segue for a minute. I'm going to take a segue from what's on this slide and discuss something that is something interesting to discuss, right? This is a webinar about real estate. It's about the impact of climate change. But there's an elephant in the room that I haven't addressed yet, and that's politics. As we know, climate change is one of the most politicized areas in the US. The Democrats claim that the planet is about to be ruined. The Republicans claim that climate change itself is a complete and utter hoax. Both parties have their own reports. Both parties have nonpartisan reports, which clearly aren't nonpartisan. So it's really hard to figure out, okay, so who's telling the truth, right? I mean, both of these parties are experts at grinding some agenda using lots of different topics, and climate change, unfortunately, is one of those topics they're using to basically push their agenda. So how do you actually tell if any of this stuff is real? Well, the honest answer is this. Whenever you worry about whether something is real or a hoax, always follow the money. Always follow the money. Because for-profit companies that are looking to generate revenue and profits and ever greater revenue and ever greater profits tend to be much better than any political party in the world at getting to the crux of the matter and truly understanding what's happening. 427, profit-making company. Moody's, profit-making company. So when I started looking at the data, my biggest concern was that I could end up misleading the people that are sitting in this webinar. There's 222 of you watching what I'm saying. I could end up misleading you and telling you stuff that's not right. So from the very beginning, whenever I felt like some article in my research had some sort of slant, a left slant, a right slant, whatever it might be, I ignored that. And what I found was, okay, let me go to the corporations, because corporations have shareholders to answer to. They need to give their CEOs multi-million-dollar raises, and that only happens because of actual provable performance, right? They've got to have certain benchmarks. So that's when I found Moody's. That's when I found 427. And what I found, and this is interesting for all of you, everything out there that is supposed to be nonpartisan about climate change looks very different from the stuff that 427 writes, looks very different from the stuff that Moody's write, because everyone else is bullshitting. They have an axe to grind. They're either for climate change or against climate change, whatever their position might be. But when I started looking at the corporations' data, because they were just simply trying to create a benchmark or a system for their clients to use, evaluate risk, that was much cleaner data. So today, pretty much everything I'm going to show you comes from corporations. It doesn't come from XYZ non-partisan, but really actually partisan study.